Hello, everybody. Welcome to Real Talk. I'm Phillip Carter. I'm here with my co-host, Alex Brown. How you doing, man?
What's up, man? How you feel?
I'm doing good. Listen, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine today. We were talking about greatness. Do you know how much greatness costs?
How much?
It costs what it costs.
Is that right? You just gonna let God be God early
Whatever
early
the
this
price
afternoon?
is,
That's
if
what
you
it
want to be
costs.
great, it costs.
That's what it costs.
What it costs.
All
And you know,
right.
we have some great people on this broadcast today. It's going to be a wonderful broadcast. We have the incomparable Dr. Joyce Garrett,
Dr. Joyce
who is
Garrett.
not only a DMV icon, but she is a national icon. We have gospel saxophonist Charles Johnson from Baltimore by way of Dayton, Ohio, is going to be with us today.
All right.
We also have the Reverend Doctor.
Reverend Doctor.
That's right, Cynthia Turner.
My friend.
That's your friend. That's right. She's my friend, too.
That's
She
it.
all right with me, too.
That's it.
She's joining us today. She's a pastor, longtime pastor now. We'll have an in-depth conversation with her. But before we go any further, we're going to hear a song by Stephen Key and Company called Wonderful God.
Place.
And we're back. You just heard Stephen Key and Company, Wonderful God. That's a wonderful song. It was on the DMV Gospel United compilation project a few years back, and it's still hitting. I am here. I am privileged. I'm blessed. We are blessed to have Dr. Joyce Garrett here. She has so many accolades. It's too many to read. But I think my greatest privilege is to know that she is always willing to mentor people from previous generations, and we really appreciate her. We also have one of her former students, but he is a DMV legend in his own right. Brother, let's say it. I don't want to say it wrong. It's
Taiwan Bradford.
And many people know you. They're going to be calling me up. Hey, man, you should know his name by now.
Just call him Bradford, man. Just call him Bradford. That's
TV, but it's definitely
TV,
something
right.
Taiwan Bradford. So, listen, we're preparing for the big Eastern High School Choir concert Saturday, July the 7th, 5 p.m., and this was something, this is a culmination, one of the culminations of your life's work. Talk about how you got started at Eastern.
Okay, I started at Eastern in 1972, and I had been on maternity leave, and I got a call from the supervisor. There's an opening at Eastern High School. I remember thinking, oh, that's that beautiful school that looks like a castle. And I was just happy to go over there. And when I got there, it was just from the beginning, it was like a love fest. They had wanted a teacher that liked gospel because the former music teacher didn't let them do gospel. So when they saw, here's this person that came that loved gospel like they loved gospel, it was, like I said, it was a love fest from the very beginning. I loved them, they loved me back. And it started from there. And then after about a year or two, I started noticing when it was gospel choir day, I'd have all these fabulous voices. 25 people come from the neighborhood to sit in a rehearsal. But in the concert choir, which was the class during the day, I had about 10 people registered. So I was like, now how am I going to fix this? So what I did after 2 or 3 years, I said, in order to be in the gospel choir, you must sing in the concert choir. You must take the class.
Right.
I really used gospel as bait.
Right, sure.
And then after I got them in there, our slogan was 360 degrees of music, because I wanted to learn some of everything.
Absolutely.
So that's how I got started.
Right. Where did you get your training to learn how to pull voices together and pull the best out of young people?
That's what I want to know.
I said that it was just from listening. I knew the sounds that I did like, and I knew the sounds that I didn't like. It was no special technique that I learned from anybody else. I used to just know that I didn't like that sound, so how can I shape it a little different? And I just started doing it. And the choir, the results were making me know that it was something to what I was doing. So I just kept doing it. I never liked bright, brassy, bright sounds unless it was at a certain spot in the music, unless it was needed. I always liked these dark, rich sounds. And so I started saying things like, I need a sound, I want the sound to look like maroon. I started making them see color. Okay, you're singing a yellow sound. We need a maroon kind of sound. And they kind of, and they kind of caught on to that.
Wow, you born and raised in Kinston. I wrote it down. Make sure. Where is Kinston near?
Kinston is it's 7 to 8 miles southeast of Raleigh.
Okay.
It's about 70 miles from the ocean.
Okay.
And it's near Goldsboro, Wilson, down in there.
You still have family down there?
Only very few. Everybody's gone now.
What? So you moved up here to go to school?
No, I moved up here when I finished college, got married, and I was in Kentucky. My husband got immediate orders to go to Vietnam, and he had 1 month notice. We had just gotten married. So I was like, where am I going to go? I don't want to go back to North Carolina. I had an aunt here. That was the only place I could have gone. So I came here and lived with my aunt, and she was a teacher. And she took me to the school board office, and I got a job in the middle of the year. I mean, amazing. There was a teacher that had retired in the middle of the year, had been there for 17 years at Langley Junior High. Her name was Miss Coverdale.
Wow.
So for the first semester, all I heard from the students was, "I sure wish Miss Coverdale was here." They,
Oh.
they did not.
Your feelings were not taken into consideration.
They did not want to see me, but I stuck it out. And then after 5 years on the junior high level, I got the job at Eastern High School. I was in heaven.
Right. So while we're at Eastern, you come in what year?
I came in Eastern 1979.
1979.
79.
Wait a minute, don't
You ain't but 20.
don't do it, Ed.
Yeah, man.
You ain't but 25, man.
Right, 27.
Talk about your experience with Dr. Garrett in the choir.
Oh my God, it was phenomenal. I graduated Eastern at 82, but I came in 79 as a student. Funny, I wasn't in the choir when I first came, and I wanted to be because I had seen this choir, and my sister had been in the choir in the 76. So I'd always went to see their engagements and things. When I got to Eastern, I said, I gotta be in the choir. So I got my schedule changed, got in the choir, and she was glad to have me. So I was just a singer, another tenor in the choir at the time. And when I got to the 12th grade, she said, come here. I heard you direct your choir at church. And I was at Tyson Temple at the time. And she said, I said, yeah. She said, well, come let me see you direct this song. And it was WYCB's "I'll Be With You." That's what he said.
Wow. I'll be with you.
That's right.
I remember that.
That was the song.
That was like the signature cut there. After that, we just been a match made in heaven ever since.
Wow, man.
Every time I have gone to any place, I take Taiwan with me. When I went to the Naval Academy, he became my assistant director there because he had the pulse of what was new right then. He would come to me and say, have you heard this new song by Richard? Have you heard this new song by Thompson Community Choir? And James Cunningham would always pick the musicians. So James picked my bands. And it's from then to now he's at Alfred Street with me.
Right.
And he still lets me know who I need to get for bass.
That's all right. That's all right.
Got that production.
But Taiwan was the only student I've ever had that I let be in the band and the choir.
Is that right?
Because I felt like you should choose. You had to be in one because we practiced 2 and 3 hours a day, and so if he was in the band, he would practice at band from like 3:30 to 4:30. He wouldn't get up to me till almost 5 o'clock. So I wanted them the whole time.
Right.
But there's something about him. He was like,
He's a good guy. That's good.
He did
That's
both
all right.
and did
That's
both
all right.
well.
So over 35 years, you guys have been together. That's a testament to itself. 35 years. So what secrets have you taken from Dr. Garrett in terms of your music ministry?
Learning how to shape sound was a big tool. We worked together with a lot of artists, on big things like Christmas in Washington and Kennedy Center Honors, and we're dealing with all these artists. Never getting a big head.
Okay.
Always knowing to stay humble, and just taking the technique. When she taught in school, I absorbed like a sponge. So everything that she did in class, I was doing my choirs at church. So and I noticed they were singing a lot better from the stuff I was learning from her.
Okay.
So to this day, I have friends who say, "You're a chip off the old block."
The newest chip is Roderick.
Oh yeah. He is running
He
with
was
it.
the same, he did the
Roger's
same
rolling.
thing that Taiwan did. Just soaked it all up. Sometimes when I see both of them direct, I'm like, they have just got it. I can hear myself saying they're saying some of the same words.
Yep.
Using some of the same
Roderick
language.
is doing a great thing.
Yes, he is.
Yes, he
And I'm gonna tell you, Roderick, you haven't. I've been trying to sing in the artist choir, and you haven't. Yeah, Al sings bass, I sing baritone. We don't have. We both read. We both got college degrees. You don't even invite us.
He did invite me.
Oh, he invited you? Oh, you didn't go. That's your problem. See, Roderick, I didn't get an invitation. See, I'm ready, Roderick. You got all these other artists. I'm ready.
So he's got it popping, I think, on the 22nd of the month.
That's right.
But I
And
have
it's going to
not-
be at Alfred Street Baptist
Yes,
Church
yeah,
I was-
at
I was-
7:30.
I even know how to get to Alpha Street.
Yeah.
See you next time.
I participated last year, so I'm gonna try to come the next 3 Mondays. Okay.
Roderick, we salute you and congratulate you. Let's talk about this concert.
Yes.
So is the concert going to be decade by decade? You're going to have
Yes.
each. Ooh.
The idea came when I realized that this was the 30th anniversary of the year that went to Europe. So that's where it started. I thought, ooh, let's get them together and do a full concert of the music we did in Europe. And the more I talked about it, the other students that heard about it said, well, what about us? Because it was just going to be them.
Right.
So then we figured out the 70s. I was there in the 70s. They know different music than the 80s.
Right.
So now, when you come to this fabulous concert, you're going to hear a 70s choir of about 35 voices singing the music they sang when they were there.
Yes.
I have rehearsal with them this evening. They're coming from everywhere.
Greats like Kenny Spears.
Oh my
Kenny
goodness.
Spears, yes. Annette Henrietta
Spears.
Morgan, Annette Spears. Then we have the 80s choir. That's when Twanda Reinhardt, Taiwan Bradford, all that crew. Then the 90s choir is Gerald Scott is
Isn't
2000.
Robin
He's
Sugar
2000.
in that 90s group?
Robin Sugar Williams, so many. Why can't we remember?
Everybody.
But the 90s choir is the largest one. It's at least 125 of them
Wow.
playing the sing.
Oh, is Mike Scott in the 90s choir too?
Mike Scott finished
Yeah.
in 95, right?
Keisha Goldsboro, too.
Lakeisha Goldsboro, Shalita Claiborne, all of them in 90s.
Right.
Those fabulous background singers. And then the 2000 choir when Patrick Lundy came. So Patrick and I are going to share that, the directing the 2000. So you have people like Gerald Scott. And don't forget, in the 90s, you have Yanni Crawley.
Yes.
I mean,
She will
it's
be
good.
there.
And she's
Leah-
coming from
Leah-
Atlanta.
Leah
God bless. You've had some singers come through there.
Oh my goodness.
Darlene
Leah
Simmons.
Lynch,
All these
Darlene
people
Simmons in the 80s. It's going to be amazing. It really is. So what we're going to do, each choir is going to sing a short medley, and then we're going to have intermission. Then the 88 choir is going to sing the part of the Palavetsin dances, that hard German piece they sang 30 years ago.
Wow.
They're going to do Birth of the Blues, and then they're going to do Richard Smallwood's I Have Come Too Far.
How are you feeling about that German piece right now?
We had a time last week.
It's been so long.
Talk about the bargain.
They looked at me like I was crazy. Oh, we had a time. So tonight I'm going to practice with them again. So I'm going to let everybody have a pencil. We're going to sit down and
walk it through.
phonetically write what those words sound like.
Wow.
But it was hard looking at that for the first time. It made us. I actually played the CD that they recorded when they came back, and somebody said, "Miss Carol, who is that?" I said, "That's you." They couldn't believe that they had learned it, and I couldn't believe when I saw how difficult it was last week to reteach it, that we did that when they were 16, 17 years old.
Wow. What's the ticket price for this?
$20 on Eventbrite, but mainly go to easternchoir.com.
Okay.
It'll take you straight to that page.
Take it straight to Eventbrite.
Listen, if you don't know about this yet, if
You gotta be there.
if you grew up in a time where Eastern, where after Joyce Garrett left the school system, then you don't really get the full effect of that era. But if you ever want to see a concert, this is going to be one. Eastern High School Choir, National Church of God, July the 7th at 5 p.m. I'm going to be there because this is going to be amazing just to see all these people in one place, just to see you pull it off one more time.
And then, I forgot to say this. After all of these different choirs sing, all 300 plus
gonna
are
come
singing
together.
at the end. And we're going to start off with Jeff Jacobs, Holy is the Lord, with 300 voices.
Don't tell us too much.
But I'm
now.
not telling you.
Last but not least, we have 2 minutes. How did you balance school, church, and family?
A fabulous husband, a wonderful husband. I've been married to him for 53 years, almost.
Goodness
Yeah,
gracious.
we all telling that age.
That's a testimony in itself, right?
Let me go out there and kiss my wife after you said
please
that.
go kiss your wife. He has supported everything I've done because in order for me to stay at school, after school for 3 hours every day or 2 hours or whatever it was, somebody had to be taking care of picking up kids and doing
you
this.
go.
I have a wonderful son, Rodney, who still lives in
Yeah.
Fort Washington, and a wonderful daughter, Melanie, who is married and lives in Jacksonville, Florida.
Wow.
But my family has been so supportive. I have brought students home to my house to live with us for a year at a time. And my children have accepted each person. They've never been jealous.
They know the drill by now.
They knew the drill, and they knew. I remember one time I was coming down Willow Road taking someone home, and she said something about she felt unsafe in where she was living.
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Go get your stuff."
Mm.
It was that simple, and she stayed with me her whole senior year. And there was this. It was like that. I would just bring him home spontaneously, and he would accept it. So
That's a blessing.
That's been a blessing that I had such.
He walked with
family
you in
support.
ministry. Your whole family
and
walked
such
with you.
wonderful students. I love my students.
Thank you for coming, man.
Thank you for
I'll
having
never
me.
forget something you said at our second at our DMV gathering. We were sitting there eating, and you got up and said, "Everybody, you gave us a word of advice. I've been telling every student I've taught since that day.
Yeah.
Throw your fastball."
Yeah, throw your fastball.
And I will never forget that.
Yes.
Because I got other pitches to throw.
Yeah, throw the one you do the best.
Throw the one you do the best. With that being said, thank y'all so much.
Thank you for
guys.
having us.
No,
I
and I'm gonna
enjoyed
have you come back so we can talk about you.
I love to.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we definitely gonna make that happen. Listen, gotta be there on July the 7th, okay? Eastern High School Choir. Your tickets are available on Eventbrite.com.
Choir.com.
EasternChoir.com. Amen, amen. We're getting ready to go to a song by Charles Johnson, Awesome God, and he'll join us later. All right.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Phillip.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Hello, and we're back. We're back. We had a video from Charles Johnson. That was awesome, God. We're back here today. I'm the co-host, Alex Brown, and we're back with Reverend Dr. Cynthia Turner Wood, right? Cynthia Turner Wood.
That's right.
And we're so glad to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome.
I'm delighted to be here.
Hey, all right. So the first thing, we just kind of want to jump into it because we only have a short time for your segment. So the first question I want to ask you is, who are you?
Well,
Wait a minute. Mm-hmm. Not what do you do?
not what do I do, but
Who are you?
Okay, I am a contemplative.
Okay.
I am someone who loves time alone, and I'm very comfortable with that. I am an introvert in an extroverted world, where I'm called on to be on, which requires downtime. But I'm also, when I think of it in terms of the church, I've been almost everything there is to be in the church.
Okay.
So I am a PK. I'm a niece of a pastor as well.
Mm-hmm.
I have been a pastor's wife. I've been a single pastor. I've been a divorced pastor,
Okay.
married pastor, remarried. So I think I can kind of cover the gamut in terms of what I've been in the church and sort of sharing different roles.
Okay.
So,
All right. And you pastor Dayspring Community Church.
I am the proud pastor of the Dayspring Community Church.
Okay.
Yes.
I know, we go back. So how long have you been
The
pastor?
pastor, 12 years now.
How long has the church been
And
in
the church is
existence?
22 years old.
Okay. Now I remember some time ago that on the church's anniversary, my son was born on that specific
that's
day.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. So that was something.
Was that the day you were starting? Or it was close to it.
Somewhere around that time. I just,
and we didn't
just
have
got
music
started.
that Sunday
Right.
because you went to do the right thing.
Well, I had
to be
to.
with your wife when your son was being born.
I had to. That was my son's mother. Yeah, it's right there. So, talk about the origin of Dayspring Community Church.
Dayspring started as a vision from my previous husband, who was frustrated in ministry and the traditional church that he was in. His vision contradicted the vision of the church, and things eventually came to a head, and Dayspring was planted out of that. So his vision was for a more inclusive congregation, more diverse, to bring young people in. The church, though they espoused that that's what they wanted, sort of ran into conflict when it was actually happening. Okay. And so that was a deal breaker for him. Mm-hmm. And so Dayspring was planted after that. He pastored for 8 years, and then felt like he had something to do.
Right.
And so the church ended, and the ministry, the marriage ended when he decided that, and so the church decided on to call a pastor, and which was a really one of the struggles during my lifetime as to what I would do then, because I was not the co-pastor but the executive pastor. Right. And so what would happen to me? And he offered to give me the church, and that didn't sound right or feel right. And I contacted some colleagues as to what I should do, and they suggested that the church go through a call process, which took a year and a half. They took it very seriously, which I'm very proud of. And after that amount of time, they called me to be pastor. So I've been pastoring ever since.
And when did you know that you wanted to pastor Dayspring?
I never wanted to pastor. I never wanted to pastor. I never wanted to preach.
Wow.
So, no.
Really?
I grew up as a PK.
But you're doing so well.
And I never wanted to marry a pastor. So, I think you don't tell God never. Okay. And when you do, God challenges you on that. But thank you for that. I can remember the moment that I knew that God was placing on my heart to pastor. And I was walking across the quad at Wesley Seminary for another reason, to go see Dr. Shelby Hagray, who was then Dean of Students. And I walked across the quad, and something dropped in my spirit. And that's how God speaks to me often, just sort of drops something into my spirit. And it said pastor. And it was so real that I skipped a step. When I walked, I was like, whoa, like that wasn't supposed to be. Maybe I should walk over here, because that couldn't be for me. Yeah. And I dismissed it. I just, let it go. And I got into Dr. Hagray's office, and we were shooting the breeze in the beginning. And she said, have you ever wanted to pastor? And so that was confirmation at that moment. But that was a year and a half ahead of anything that I knew was going to break up in terms of the church or the marriage. And so God often prepares us, unbeknownst to us, that's where God is going. So that's when I was like, oh, okay, that's why that happened and when it happened.
Okay. So several years later, you said 16?
What?
No, you passed in 12.
12 years. 12
so
years.
12 years later, what has been one of your biggest, I guess, your biggest pet peeves about ministry in terms of dealing with it?
I think one of the, I'll say challenge, yeah. I think one of the challenges is in pastoring today is that people have really short attention spans. And so we in the church are competing with so much else that's going on, and it's frustrating because I don't think church ought to be on that level, as everything else in people's lives. I mean, your faith ought to trump everything. Oh, that word.
It's okay.
Sorry, your faith ought to rise to the fore over everything else. And but I also understand that children are important, and their extracurricular activities are important. They often happen on Sunday morning, unfortunately, and all of the competing things. So I think that one of the challenges is creating, my goal is to create a church community, a faith community of people who are steeped in the words. Our mission is to create a biblically functioning community that where people's faith lasts them for a lifetime. So you don't volley here and there. You don't hit up on a struggle and then all of a sudden you're I got to leave church and or I got to go to this church or I got to do. I really want people to be rooted and grounded and be transformed by the renewing of their minds through the Word of God.
Okay. Talk about your perspective as a female pastor, because I know that there are different things in terms of, I guess, the challenges, but your perspective being a female pastor.
I think, God calls people, and we as people then bring the gifts that God has placed inside of us into the ministry. And so whether you're male or whether you're female, when you can bring your authentic self. I think when we run into challenges is when we as females try to pastor like men pastor. I think God called us because there's something different in us. Not better, but different. And we approach this thing a little differently than men. And so to take this opportunity and try to mimic what the men do, or use only that as a model, I think we shortchange what God is really attempting to do.
Okay.
Preaching style. How do you prepare for a sermon? Like, what's that week like for you?
I start as pretty much Sunday evening, thinking about next Sunday's sermon. I'm really good when I'm working on a series because I know what's coming next, as opposed to relying on that contemplative side to kind of hear what is God saying, or where what do the people need, or what's going on in society. So all of those are different ways to approach it. But once I get a message or a word, or where I think God is calling us, then I try to sit down and look at the text and find when I'm teaching students, and their mantra, they will always say, my question is going to be, where's the tension in the text?
Sure.
Find the tension in the text. You can't just preach the text. Yeah, and so look for the tension, and then figure out what that is, and then work around developing a foundation, a structure to go with that makes the word flow. And most of the time that's found right there in the Word. You can follow the Word through a narrative style of preaching or expository style of preaching, and that and it comes together. Hopefully it comes together. But to be really disciplined about not saying what I want to say, or not or being open enough to know that where I start and where I think it's going to go might not be where it goes.
In terms of you preaching with or without notes, what do you prefer? I think I know the answer to this question. But.
Yeah, I am a manuscript preacher, and that's quite frankly it's good for me. But it's also, I do also recognize that sometimes it's a crutch. I'm also really good when I let go of the manuscript, but I'm not as faithful as
because you know the story.
I know the story.
Right.
Well, and structure is, when you have organized a sermon a certain way, then you can do that, and you know where it's going. That's really, I think, the trick to all of that. But I need to get better at that.
don't.
I'm working on that.
I always find it amazing to see people like I heard Otis Moss the third the other week, and just amazing how they formulate the ideas in their head. So here's a funny question. I've been I'm not sure if you know this, but I've been preaching for a long time now, in and out.
Okay.
On and off the keyboard.
Okay.
But
right. I heard you on the keyboard.
Right.
You off the keyboard.
But can you talk about a particular sermon that you got in the car and said, "Oh, I flunked this"?
Oh my goodness, how many?
I'm talking about when you really, the people looked at you and said, "This next Sunday."
Right. What's next time?
Yeah, yeah. Well, my other field is as an editor,
Right.
writer and editor, and so that's also really a challenge because you never finish writing the sermon. But I preached in New York one Sunday, and I felt as the bats flying over my head. The vultures. I was like, "You are dead up here." I could see them while I was preaching, and I just wanted the moment to be over. Just let me get out. I felt so bad about that sermon that when I got to the airport, I tried to change my ticket so I could get out of Brooklyn quicker than the flight was.
Goodness.
And I paid extra money to do that. The interesting thing about it, though, is that pastor, who is not someone who's going to sugarcoat things, was shocked that I felt that way. Was shocked that I even said that was really complimentary about the sermon and said it was good. So I think, sometimes, though we may not feel, we may be in a different context, people are listening differently than what we think. And the Spirit does work that we, thank God, the Spirit does work that we can take no credit for.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So let me ask you a question. What makes Dayspring Church, what makes that church unique?
Dayspring, we call Dayspring Church Extraordinaire. We also call Dayspring Church, as you know, experimental. So we are not afraid to try new things, not afraid to fail at something, but even more importantly, not afraid to say, that didn't work, so we're not, or this is not working, so we'll not continue to do this. Whereas I think sometimes we can get so entrenched or, traditional in our approach that we just keep doing something because we've always done it that way. And at some point you have to look at a thing and say, you know what, this is really, we could be doing this better. There's a more excellent way, and let's try that.
Sure.
So,
Let me ask a question, because I know that your mother was an outstanding woman, and of course she's passed on now, but if you can, I heard you preach a sermon. I heard you preach her eulogy, and you said something that I will never forget. You said, "Thank you, Mama, for teaching me how to live, and thank you for teaching me how to die, or showing me how to die." And I just found that so poignant at the time. How much of an influence has your mother or your parents played in terms of what you do now, and in terms of how you move? Incredible influence. As I said, my father was a pastor, and so I don't get necessarily all of the models or the ways of pastoring from him, but his faithfulness I certainly get. My mother was, as you know, my world, and still is just my world. And so her faithfulness and her tenacity, her never give up, her, teaching me to be a strong woman. Cynthia, you have to be a strong woman. You have to, and yet at the same time, not afraid to show weakness. I think it was in her last days. She was a quadriplegic in her last days and lived with me. Both of them lived with me. It's funny. My parents were separated when I was in the 8th grade. They didn't divorce until I was in my 20s. And then they ended up coming full circle, living with me in their last days. So, and one in one room and one in the other room. And my mother would joke she never thought she would, be back in that situation. But to watch them come around to each other in the end, and just their love for each other kind of teaches you
that she used to say, "You never know who you're gonna need to bring you a glass of water," you know, and so the learning to put some things aside, you know, the changes that come in life, the difficulties and mountains, the struggles, the storms, and all of that. My mother taught me how to weather all of that. I don't know that line that I said, "Thank you, Mama, for teaching me how to live." I know that part, and then I said, and for also teaching me how to die. That wasn't in the script, on the manuscript. That came in the moment, and I'm not sure that I even know yet what that means. You know, it came in the moment, and I guess, you know, I'll have to understand that better. But that's when sometimes preaching does that. You get words that, you know, I'll have to figure it out.
Right.
And it's funny that you say that. I think about like even your father and just segmenting, because I know we're short on time. But the funny thing, I remember the day that your father died, and you got married the same day.
Right. Yeah. That's my life. My life goes like that. So my father died. My mother died in January of 2016. My father died in November of 2016, and it was the day that I got married. So I decided I got married on a Sunday. It was a surprise wedding, a pop-up wedding to a wonderful man, Reverend Dr. Jesse Elwood.
All right.
I decided I was going to preach that day because you know, I'm going to be that kind. I'm going to say I preached on my wedding day, and I preached. Came home, and on my way home, my niece called and said, "You need to come home now." And I said, "Well, I'm on my way home." And she said, "No, you need to come straight home." And I said, "Well, I'm coming. I just need to run by the store. I run and show your mom where to put some signs or something." And she said, "No, you need to come home now." And so I made my way home. I pulled in the garage, and she met me, and at the garage door, and she said, "Papa's not breathing." And so. Long story short, I ended up running upstairs, calling 911, performing CPR on him as they instructed, you know, get him on the floor, but, you know, do this and all that. But anyhow, they paramedics came, and he did not make it. At the same time all this was going on, I had 100 people coming to what was supposed to be an engagement party, although we knew it was a real wedding.
Right.
And they were, you know, at the venue waiting for us to get married, and we had to decide what to do in that moment, you know, with considering. Fortunately, one of the people who was performing the ceremony, Pastor Macklin was one, the other one was Dr. Smith, Leonard Smith. And so I called, and he's been a longtime friend and supporter and confidant and pastor and all that to me. And he came to the house and explained the situation to him. And he made clarity out of it. He said, you know, your father, even with his dementia, understood that you're in good hands now. And so he can leave you in these good hands. And so that made it all make sense. And so we were able to go forward with the wedding, albeit an hour or so late.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for being
Thank
so
you.
transparent.
Oh, absolutely.
I got to have you back because there's some more. I want to dig a little deeper about this women in ministry thing and all that. Because, I mean, I think anytime I have a female or a lady, a woman pastor on the show, you go through so many challenges that are unique to you.
To women.
And we need to talk about that.
Okay. I'd be
So,
happy to.
absolutely, let's schedule something to come back. Y'all, the Reverend Dr. Cynthia Turner,
Thank
pastor
you.
of the Dayspring
Thank you.
Community
My
Church.
friend.
That's
My
right.
friend,
We're
my
getting ready to go
man.
to a
Grand.
quick commercial, and we'll be right back with Charles Johnson. After this is going to be the ending. Move up a little bit. Move your mic up a little bit for you, Al. Are we back? We are back. That time went fast. Listen, I am here with gospel saxophonist, my friend, brother, from Baltimore, Maryland, by way of Dayton, Ohio.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The Reverend, right? Is it Reverend?
Hey, well, associate pastor.
Associate Pastor Charles
Elder.
Johnson, right? What church?
I'm out at Crown of Life Worship Center.
Crown of Life Worship Center in Baltimore, Maryland,
It's
right?
in Edgewood, Maryland.
Edgewood, Maryland. Is that
Yes,
right
sir.
outside of Baltimore?
Right outside of Baltimore, going towards Delaware on 95.
Thank you for joining us, man.
Glad to be here.
Talk about your beginnings. How did you start playing the saxophone?
Man, I've been playing. I started out in the Dayton Public School system, in band, 4th grade. Just had an interest for, trying to play some type of instrument. Of course, I drove my mother crazy because I brought home one instrument, then I brought home another instrument. So just loved music and found out that I had the gift and the natural tact for it. And my music teacher kind of took me under his wing. So I just played in band, and before I knew it, I was just playing multiple instruments.
Do your parents play or sing?
My mother sings.
Okay.
My father, and I was raised in a single-parent home. My father loves music. But my mother was my primary inspiration. She sang with the Ephesians in Dayton, Ohio. Sammy Stevens, I don't know if you know, but they traveled all over. But a great singer, great ear for music. But nobody played anything. My grandmother played piano, and I think I might have got it from her.
Yeah, so you play piano and saxophone.
I play
right?
keyboards as well.
And then you matriculated. That's my SAT
Yeah,
word
yeah,
today.
yeah.
Matriculate.
You matriculated to Kent State University School of Music. Right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I majored on saxophone and actually majored on tenor sax, which is a little different. Most people major on alto, the little smaller one that's used. But I like the tenor because
big boy,
I really
deep-
like
deep tone.
deep tones, rich tone. I love Grover Washington Jr.
Right.
He was one of my major influences. So I was playing Wine Light and everything else I could play that
Okay.
he played. So he was a
Okay.
major influence in my life.
Right. So this is amazing. You play keys on Sunday morning, right?
Yeah.
Then you get up and pick up your saxophone.
Yeah.
And do something
do
else in the
whatever.
afternoon.
That's it.
Wow, that's amazing,
Try
man.
to sing, not as good as my mother, but try to do that.
And you teach choir.
Yeah, I'm a choir director as well.
Right.
Been doing that since I was about 14, 15 years old.
You got
So
10 jobs.
Yeah, I always got
Look,
to make
before
money.
we get into the Charles Johnson, the artist, there's Charles Johnson, the minister, there's Charles Johnson, the choir director.
Yes, sir.
What are some of your challenges in being in church music ministry?
The challenges are just the scheduling. You have to be very coordinated, be very flexible. That's really the main thing.
Well, you got it easy. That's what your only challenge.
I think that's the main, that's the main thing. I mean, I've been doing it. I love doing it. I love people. Love working with people. I
That's
always
good.
have loved choirs.
That's good.
So it hasn't been too much of a challenge. Because I'm actually Adventist, so I worship on Saturday, but I play
You do both?
in church, and I do both.
So what
I
Adventist
worship
church do you go to?
Crown of Life Worship Center.
You play there too?
Yes. Yeah.
And what's the Sunday spot?
The Sunday spot is Sharp Street Memorial United Methodist Church, very historic church.
And where is that at?
That's in Dolphin Street in Edding, right in downtown Baltimore.
Okay, yeah, that was the church that was referring to at first.
Yes, yes.
So you got Sharp Street, and then you have the Crown of Life Worship Center.
That's it.
My God.
That's all right, man. You busy on the weekends, ain't you?
That's it. I'm doing the Lord's work.
How's that week? How's the week
That's
look
it.
like? What is
The week I'm working at Verizon Wireless. So,
let
I
me
stay
get-
up at 9 to 5.
So you work 7 days a
We
week?
need to talk when this interview is over. He works at Verizon Wireless.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, I looked at
Yeah.
my last bill. Charles,
gotcha.
we need to have a conversation.
He can't do that. I work in government contracts. I don't work on the personal side, so no, that excludes me. Now.
He might know somebody to know somebody.
That's
Right.
That's right.
Let's
That's
talk about your CD.
Yes.
With an S.
Yes.
You have you cut your first CD when?
2000.
2000?
Yeah, I just moved to Baltimore, I think, in 97 from Ohio. Came to play for an evangelistic crusade and ended up liking it here. And Patrick Austin, a great musician here in
Yes.
Baltimore.
Oh, yeah.
area, he recommended Sharp Street. Bruce Haskins was the pastor at that time, and I ended up going there, being a musician, and been there for ever since. Actually, I left for 6 years to go to Alabama, and that's a whole nother story. But I'm back here because I have grandchildren. So.
What prompted you to say, "Hey, I want to be an artist. I want to record my own CDs"?
People affirmed the gift, and the musicianship. I'm not saying I'm the best. I wasn't, I wanted to be like Kenny G and Grover and Najee and all those. So I just really put in a lot of work, practicing my craft, trying to develop my sound.
Right.
And people said you really need to. They were blessed by the music I was doing. I used to play a lot of jazz, but God kind of pulled me more towards the gospel. Still using my style and my technique, but the message had changed. So
Okay.
It really just changed my craft, but I developed my sound over time, and people said, you need to get in the studio.
So who are other saxophonists that you might admire? Like, Either old school or new school? Or...
Well, you got the history. You got John Coltrane. I mean, in the old jazz era. But Grover Washington, I think, was my primary influence.
Gotcha.
Mr. Magic.
Yes, and Najee. People out when I would play certain gigs, people thought I actually was Najee because we kind of looked alike, light skin, and had the goatee and everything. I said, no, I'm not him. But you know him. Even locally, Kim Waters. You know, all of these guys have influenced my style.
Let's talk about your CD, your newest project.
Yes.
2017, you released it?
Yes. Yes, last year.
Right. I remember because, you know, we all in this together. You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
So talk about the project. What's on it?
This is called True Worship. So you can see my shirt here.
I'm a true worshiper.
I'm a true worshiper, man.
Where can people get those T-shirts at?
You can get them. Actually, going to be on my website. It's coming soon.
Okay.
Calm down. But right now, they would just have to hit me up via my website.
Right.
And I'm sure that's showing there.
Right.
But I'm trying to get it on the website as well. So. But True Worship came from John chapter 4, actually, where Jesus met the woman at the well and was talking, and then he got all in her business, letting her know, you know, about the wild husbands that she had and all of that. But then she switched the subject about worship, and he said, you know, now's the time that it's not about where you worship, but it's about who you worship. So that's how this album was birthed. So it's all about worship. It's my experience through worship, entering into the presence of God. I've got some mostly original tunes on there, but I do have some standard, like Praise Is What I Do is a very familiar thing. Talks about worship, so I end the thing with that. But most of it is came out that I got to work with some great musicians, Jonathan DuBose Jr., Sean Michael Ray on bass, a lot of guys who have been in the industry.
How can folks find your CD?
They can find it on Amazon. It's at all the digital platforms. It's everywhere out there. I've got it on CD Baby, Amazon, iTunes, anywhere you can get it. If you go to my website, you can get it there.
Okay, you've been in ministry for a while now. You have any advice for any young musicians out there?
Young musicians, I would say, number one, just prepare yourself, not just technically, but spiritually. Make sure you stay in the Word, especially when you're speaking of gospel music. Sure. You need to make sure your faith, you're not just performing, but you're living what you're presenting to the people. And that's my whole thing behind true worship. Is not, you know, Romans 12:1 says, presenting our bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. So worship is a lifestyle. So I challenge them to live the life that they're proclaiming on stage and off stage, and to you know, practice your craft, and be humble.
Right. How can folks find you?
They can find me on my website, www.charlesjohnsonjr.com, and they can also go to Facebook. I'm at Gospel Charles Johnson Jr. They can follow me there, and those are the main areas they can reach me at.
Y'all pick up Charles Johnson's project.
Yes.
I have it. I listen to it in the cars. Great riding music down the road.
What's the name of it again?
It's called True Worship.
True Worship.
True Worship.
Okay. Lastly, talk about your family real quick.
My family, I am married. It just celebrated 20 years.
Bless you.
Johnson. Yeah,
bless
that's
you.
what brought me to Baltimore, to the same woman, one woman. I met her. She's from East Baltimore, and we've been married. We've got 2 grown children, and I have 6 grandchildren. So that's what brought me back to Baltimore.
That's all right, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
having
having
me,
me, Phillip. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Charles,
Thank
the
you,
product
sir.
of the IGA conference as well.
That's
and
it.
Thank you for your support for the IGA conference.
You're very welcome.
Listen, y'all, Eastern High School Choir, July the 7th at 5 p.m. But I also want to alert you to tonight. We have the event Jazzpiration is going on tonight, a night with 3 legends featuring Anthony Walker, Tony Walker, and Professor Alan Johnson at the Queen's Chapel United Methodist Church.
Yes, sir.
At 7:30 p.m. tonight. You can come and pay for your ticket at the door. It's going to be phenomenal. It is going to be extraordinary. You don't want to miss tonight at the Queen's Chapel United Methodist Church. And we have the IGAA conference coming up, Independent Gospel Artists Alliance conference coming up, July the 12th through the 14th at the Queen's Chapel United Methodist Church. For those of y'all who watch this broadcast from out of town, you can fly into BWI Airport or drive straight in. It's the best investment for under $200 that one can make in their career. Knowledge is powerful and information is essential. And I'm going to end this broadcast like I started it.
All right.
Do you know how much greatness costs?
How much it costs?
It costs what it costs. Greatness costs what it costs.
Amen.
And if you want to be great, if you want to survive, if you want to strive, if you want, you know, to really, really be successful, you have to be willing to pay the cost, and there is no dollar amount. It just costs what it costs.
I know that's right.
And with that, I bid you farewell. Stay tuned for next week's broadcast of Real Talk with Phillip Carter. Have a blessed day. Thank you so much, Alice. Great job today. And Charles Johnson, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Take care, y'all.